Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Mock Report. My name is Brandon, or ProStacksBrandon, as you will find me on DraftKings, and this is my esteemed colleague. State your name.
Matty K, aka Mr. Six. So we meet again, sir.
So, anyways, just a brief little intro, because we don't really do this too well in our videos. We are two average Joes. We are by no means fantasy pros, although we love fantasy and pretty much spend our entire week like talking about lineups and stuff. But we are on an epic quest to win the Millie Maker. We both have families, we both have full-time jobs, and we are hoping that maybe one day we could do something like this for work, because that would be damn awesome. Comments,
You might
concerns?
be average. I'm clearly above average.
Okay, in height. Okay, so we got a new structure to our show. Anybody that's watching this right now, I'm going to break it down into 4 major segments, but I will also post the full video if you want to watch the full video of us going through each segment, or if you want to just kind of stick around for... this video specifically is called Main Slate Mayhem, where we will be highlighting some matchups that you might want to attack for DFS this week in the main slate for the Millie Maker, where it will be followed by precision pivots, and this one will be pivots off your projected high-owned guys, and maybe some of the off-slate games that you might want to target if you're playing a full week lineup. Then we have positional powerhouses, where we will tell you our lock at each position, and I'm probably going to throw in a pivot with my lock, so my lock and a lock pivot, and then we will do picks and plays.
That's a lot of words.
It is a lot of
Technical
words.
terms, my friend.
But then we do picks and plays, which we've been doing.
I think I have a lock pivot in my toolbox.
Oh. Oh, that's good. Anyway, so let's get right into Main Slate Mayhem. We are only looking at the 9 games that you will be playing in the main slate for the Millie Maker, because it's Bye-Mageddon. There's like 6 teams on bye. And then you have the Sunday morning game in London. And then you have the Sunday nighter and the Monday nighter that are not in the Millie Maker main slate tournament. So we are going to be looking exclusively at the 9 games for the main slate. So we'll get right into it. What is your biggest matchup?
Well, I actually, earlier today told you I didn't really like many of these games. And I don't think I like many of these games from the perspective of sitting down on Sunday and watching them. But for fantasy purposes, I actually see there's quite a bit of value all over the place. You've got the Bills playing at home again against a fairly weak defense, a Raiders team that can put up points but hasn't been able to stop anybody. I love the Bengals up against the Colts. They're going to be able to shred that defense. My favorite game on the slate is probably Carolina at Tampa Bay. I'm going to be pretty heavily invested in a lot of players in that game. But really, you can pretty much find value in any matchup on this slate. It's pretty dynamite when it comes to fantasy.
I'd say my top 3, and not because I'm biased for one of the matchups here, but my top 3 is going to be Cincinnati versus Indianapolis. So Cincy's at home, Indy's visiting.
Blowout.
And yes, there's definite blowout potential, but then there's the high ownership, absolute dud potential too. So followed by my San Fran and Philly. This is where I would have a bias because I am a huge Philly fan, but this, again, we just saw what Dallas did to them. And, I mean, it wasn't necessarily Dallas. It was more Ezekiel Elliott. But we've also seen how Philly has handled even strong opponents this year. I wouldn't call Washington a slouch by any means. And they're going up against San Fran. This could have blowout potential. And then
it looks like another blowout potentially.
Yeah, and then Carolina and Tampa Bay, and we just saw Tampa Bay score the most points that Buffalo allowed last week. So, and that's with a slightly injured Jameis Winston. And Carolina, they're coming off not the greatest performance, and actually another controversial thing with Cam Newton walking out on the reporters today. And last time this happened,
it's written in his contract. He's got to do diva-like things every once in a while.
So, like the last time when I said, I'm going to avoid him because of, media coverage, and that was a mistake because he went off. So those are my top 3 games that I'd like to focus on for the main slate. Let's dive into, you like Carolina and Tampa Bay, so let's dive right into that.
All right, well, it's one of those games. It's got 46 implied points. It's second on the slate to Chargers and the Patriots in terms of how many points are expected to be scored. I just like it because you've got 2 fairly solid offenses going against 2 questionable defenses. And I mean, Carolina's had their moments where they've probably been able to shine a little bit, but they're not the Carolina defense that we've seen in 2014, 2015. So I think this is going to be definitely a back and forth. Jameis Winston's better at home. Cam Newton showed that he can put up points on the road this year. I just like sort of everybody, like really everybody in this game. I think Doug Martin's got a good shot at running against Carolina. I think Christian McCaffrey's probably going to have quite the day. He's been catching on average 6 or 7 catches a game. Cam Newton can probably put up at least 2-3 total touchdowns. Jameis Winston, when you doubt the guy, he might not be winning games, but he's winning fantasy games. So I like pretty much top to bottom everybody involved in this game. I'd like to have some exposure pretty much across the board. My favorite plays are probably Mike Evans on one side and Christian McCaffrey on the other, and both of the quarterbacks.
So basically I went on PFF today, and I was looking at just their fantasy projections for the week, not any of the matchup data, but yeah, exactly. It comes out tomorrow. So just looking at that game, we have in the top 5 QBs coming in at 5 is Newton, so they're projecting him to have some points. In running backs, there's literally no one from this game in the top 5, and then wideouts you have.
Misleading though.
It is misleading. I'm just simply stating what PFF has out there right now, which some people might just follow as gospel. You have Mike Evans, he's the 4th, and then you have Panthers defense, and that's basically it that they have in it. But I see a lot more profitable matchups. Like you're looking at the touchdown a game rate, like he's pretty much a touchdown a game. Even though last game he had a flash in the pan, I do not think that they're going to be running 2 tight ends like that. I think that was just like the second touchdown was like a perfectly designed play. So Cameron Brate is always a play when Tampa Bay's playing, especially if you're streaming. Go ahead.
Sorry. Even though O.J. Howard was the tight end that went off, Tampa does typically run 2 tight ends quite often, but that's where the passes were going. Like they were going up the middle of the field. He was targeting his tight ends like he typically does. Just so happened that O.J. Howard was the guy that took advantage of it on the day. Now you're going to see that probably happen, especially over the next few years as O.J. Howard acclimatizes to the NFL and he starts to really take advantage of all the knowledge that's going on in this offense. He is the tight end of the future in Tampa, but for now, Cameron Brate's been producing. I think he's going to continue to produce pretty consistently. I mean, the guy's been averaging, up until last week, he was averaging like 16 PPR, 18 PPR points a week. He'd scored a touchdown in 5 straight weeks. I mean, the guy's money in the bank, so I'm not too worried about him. I love Mike Evans in this. I don't like Carolina defense, to be honest. Like,
no, neither do I. I don't see other in the top 5.
Yeah, well, it's probably because the turnover differential in Jameis Winston's career has been that he throws a lot of interceptions. And, he might throw 1 or 2 this game. Who knows? I don't know how his shoulder's feeling, but it's not his throwing shoulder, so he's probably okay. But he shredded Buffalo defense at home, and that's not an easy thing to do. They'd held opponents to 17 points or less for the whole season. So I like this game. I think it's going to be a pretty big shootout, and I want to have pieces of it all over the place. Except for John Stewart. I'm not touching John Stewart.
I like McCaffrey, too, and it's funny because McCaffrey's kind of like that enigma where, like, if you look at his yardage, it's not great, but the guy in a PPR structure...
His rushing yardage is not great.
Yeah, like the guy in a PPR structure is unreal because his floor is so high. So you're always going to see receptions from him. Cam Newton always has the potential to go off. I mean, Tampa Bay has had a game. Was it against the Bears that they lit them up on defense? So it's not really. I think it was in week like 2 or 3.
Well, they just played the Bears.
Okay, then definitely not the Bears. I forget who it was. But anyways, they had one game, so I see 2 poor defenses and 2 pretty decent offenses going off here. So yeah,
it's no knock on Luke Kuechly. I mean, he's a great linebacker, but I don't think they're going to be able to stop this passing attack on Tampa. It's too potent. They're slinging it around too much. Interesting facts. I mean, you got Christian McCaffrey, who's averaging 6 catches a game as a running back, and he hasn't even scratched the surface of what he can do as a runner.
No.
So I think I said it last week. This guy's got the kind of wiggle that you see in video games, and if he can sort of take what he was accomplishing in college and translate it to the NFL, you're going to see some really startling abilities on the field all of a sudden. Tampa's a terrible run defense, so this might be the game where you actually see him break off a long run, in addition to the fact that he's probably going to get his 5 or 6 catches that he's been getting for however many games this season. On the other side of the field, Mike Evans averaging like 10 catches a game, 10 targets a game for the last 2 years. That's ridiculous. That's top three in terms of market share on his team. The guy's going to get targeted whether he's being shadow covered, whether he's being double covered, whether he's being boxed over the top. It doesn't matter. Winston throws the ball to him like crazy. But on the other side of the field, with a much better matchup against cornerbacks that are not even rated in the top 50 on PFF, you got Deshaun Jackson, who's having a bit of a renaissance. If you didn't even call it that, because he was a 1,000-yard receiver last year. But he's averaging 7 targets a game this year with Winston. He hasn't done that since 2013, and we know how good that year was for him.
Well, he had a deep ball last week, but it was called back, I believe. He had a nice catch. But
anyway, it's off any defense. But what I like to see is that they're throwing it to him more consistently, right? Like usually when you've got a deep threat, it's 3-4 times a game that they take a shot at him, and they're looking for that big play. But Deshaun's involved in this offense. He's taking crossing routes. He's taking comebacks. Like he's getting legitimate 7 targets a game, which when you can pull off the kind of air yards and the kind of yards per catch that he's got, 7's all you need, and you're going to average like 80, 90, 100 yards a game.
So written down here, I have Deshaun Jackson. I got Mike Evans, Funchess, and Benjamin, because who knows who Cam's going to throw to. I got Newton and McCaffrey for this matchup.
Yo, you want a fun fact about that too with Funchess and Kelvin Benjamin?
He hit me with it.
The Giants. So Benjamin and Funchess are both, I think it's 6'4" and 6'5". There is not a single cornerback on Tampa over 5'11".
Sounds nice.
You tell me.
So we'll move off that game. Now we're going to go to Indy and Cincinnati.
Blow it.
I think I really want to target this one. And actually, when I was mentioning the PFF projections, all 3 of these games that we kind of mentioned, like Philly, San Fran, Indy, Cincy, and Carolina, Tampa, all 3 quarterbacks are in the top 5. So
definitely.
Now I know that it might hurt a little bit if you're going to play Andy Dalton, the guy who will throw the ball away on 4th down. Might as well have punted it. But for me this week, I'm going to say this, that Andy Dalton is my dentist pick of the week. And I say that because it sucks. You don't want to do it. It hurts sometimes, but you might be better in the end. So I'm going to say that. He's my dentist pick of the week is Andy Dalton, and I'm definitely going to stack him with AJ, and as a flyer throw in Croft, because I think he's got 8 receptions and 5 touchdowns or something crazy like that. So
that's not that bad. He's got 3 on the year.
It's a ridiculous ratio anyways. Maybe it's 5 receptions and 3 touchdowns. But so I'm barely looking at Indy for this game. I'm just all over the Bengals on this one.
All right, fair enough. They're 3rd highest in implied points scored with 25.5. So as much as it might hurt to run Andy Dalton, I mean, if you're looking for who's probably, or at least right now is looking like a top 5 quarterback on the week, you're paying down on DraftKings for $5,700. And I mean, it's nice to be able to free up that kind of cash when, generally speaking, you're paying $6,000-$7,000 for one of the top quarterbacks on the slate. The only one that's kind of around his price point is Tyrod Taylor, who he could probably put up some decent points too. But my beef with Buffalo is they've got all these prime matchups and they
no receivers.
Yeah, they got nobody to throw the ball to. Like even with Jordan Matthews coming back last year, I was like, okay, or sorry, last game, I was like, okay, finally he's got a receiver now. I can actually, believe all of the data that says that Tyrod Taylor is going to have a good game. He didn't have a bad game, but he didn't have an amazing game. But Matthews got targeted 3 times. He made 2 catches for nothing. So I don't know how much his thumb is still bugging him. But in terms of budget quarterbacks, if you want to pay down for a guy that's probably going to have a good shot at 300 yards and 2-3 touchdowns, Dalton's the man. Like, I don't know. I don't mind the dentist.
Yeah.
He's nice.
Like that, so basically I got Dalton, Croft, Green, and Cincy D are like what I'm looking at, and Joe Mixon.
Yeah, so like I told you earlier today, I love Joe Mixon just because if it gets blown out, he's going to run this game out. And for the first 3 or 4 games, they were splitting this like rushing load between the 3 running backs on that team. And it was kind of ridiculous because it was nullifying all 3 of them. But now, since they made the coordinator switch, they're targeting A.J. Green like crazy. And they're running the ball almost exclusively. I shouldn't say completely exclusive, but almost exclusively through Joe Mixon, regardless of game flow or situation. He's getting passes, he's getting rushes. So I see this game blowing wide open early. I think AJ is going to go off for a big long touchdown. He's going to get 8 or 9 catches at least, probably be in the 100, 150 yard range. So he's always going to be a top receiver when he's got a matchup like this. But if this game's over by half, Joe Mixon's going to run it out for 15, 20 minutes.
And if there's going to be anyone that's going to score, I'm not going to say it's going to be, like, mostly I'd say, like, T.Y. Hilton, smash that. But his home-away splits are, like, reminiscent of Ben Roethlisberger. So he's in Cincinnati. Chances are he's not going to put up numbers. The guy that I would target on that would be Doyle. He's pretty much your only option there. He sees consistent targets. He's a check-town guy for Brissett. So he might be one of your cheap tight end plays, and then you can maybe spend some more in your flex spot. So even in this game alone, you have 2 fairly cheap tight ends in Croft and Doyle. Well, it looks like we lost a little bit of connection there. You were talking about Doyle?
Yeah, Doyle's got a good sort of floor, I'd say, as a check down guy, but I don't like this offense at all without Andrew Luck. They're not scoring touchdowns. They're not moving the ball the way they need to. I hate T.Y. Hilton in this. I think he's facing off against Arcais Denard for most of his routes, and Cincy defense has been holding number 1 receivers to pretty low scores. Nobody's really gone off against them. I mean, you can kind of say that Antonio Brown put up a goodish amount of points last week, but in all honesty, I mean, it was below his averages. He got that 1 touchdown in the first half, and then he was pretty quiet to finish out the game. It definitely wasn't a vintage Antonio Brown game from him. So even the best receiver in the last decade couldn't really produce against this defense. So I don't think T.Y. Hilton's going to.
This is true.
AJ Green, though, oh my God.
That's basically all we need to really say about that game. It's going to be a blowout.
His ceiling is like 200 yards, man.
It's something like that. It's going to be like a Amari Cooper breakout game.
Could be.
So we'll move on to our third feature game here. San Fran at Philly. Carson Wentz coming off of a beautiful win on Monday night. And let me just start off by saying I'm pretty sure, and I'm sure anybody that watches football will know the play I'm talking about, but I'm pretty sure when the pocket collapsed and so did the entire Washington defense on Carson Wentz, the sound that came out of that was whoop as he slipped through for the first down. So basically I have written down here Zach Ertz consistent all year long. He's going to be your pay up tight end. It's either him or Gronk, but I'm going to say play Zach Ertz because we're playing San Fran. You got Wentz. We saw Smallwood in the first half, not so much in the second half, and the only thing that worries me is Blunt gets the touches when you're 10 yards or in, but I think Smallwood has that potential to break through and maybe get a receiving touchdown and maybe some running. Like, he's not a bad rusher either, so he could be a play. Then you have Aguilar. I don't know so much about Jeffrey in this. Aguilar's been he learned how to catch the ball this year, so he's been, paying dividends like crazy.
USC's breaking the trend.
And then Eagles D, which is, again, the Eagles D is probably going to be a popular bet against San Fran, but again, I only have Eagles players here. There's no one really that I like on San Fran. They have Garcon, they have Kittle, but I don't see them doing much against the Eagles, even though the Eagles D is banged up.
Hey, I learned something fun. Kittle was actually the college roommate of Beathard, CJ Beathard.
Oh.
They're bros.
So why aren't they connecting for more?
They're like bros like me and you. I don't know.
What do you think about this game?
So I don't value, first of all, we're both Philly fans, but I don't value the Philly D quite as much in this one. I think their pass rush and their run stopping abilities are very, very, very strong. Without Jordan Hicks, they lose a little bit of that defense. It's not quite as strong as it was, especially up the middle. He's a great coverage linebacker, and he also had the ability to create pressure. I don't really think that versus the Kyle Shanahan offense and, the way they can pass the Hyde and, the way that just looking at CJ Beathard and the way that he's moved the ball, maybe not as awesome as you'd like, but I mean, he's thrown for 250 plus yards for back-to-back games and scored at least one total touchdown. So he hasn't been a total Trubisky shit show. But I think this is actually going to be a more interesting game to watch than a lot of people think. It might even be another game where San Fran loses by only 3 points, but it could also be a bit of a shootout or a bit of a blowout because Philly's implied for 29.5 points. So that's pretty ridiculous. I don't love the running backs in this game only because they don't seem to really focus on anybody. Blount, you can call him the short yardage and touchdown guy, but I mean, how many touchdowns is the guy? He's got like 2 this year. So yeah. He's not really even doing that. And then the other guys are sort of being like Smallwood and Clement are kind of just sort of rotating in and out. And if one of them breaks off a big play, maybe they'll be good. But I mean, nobody's really doing it. And Wentz is playing so good through the air. That's kind of the way this offense is shaping up. So I do like Jeffrey in this game. I think he could really show up. San Fran doesn't really have a secondary that's stopping too many people. When Jared Goff has a career day against you, it says a lot. So I feel like this could be a game where Jeffrey does show up. He does get the targets. He's been pretty consistently involved. He just hasn't really clicked with Carson Wentz. And it's a little concerning, but at the same time, maybe it takes a little bit more. Maybe it takes a few more games. But I could see him going for like 20 points, that kind of thing. Aguilar has turned into a touchdown threat. Love the guy. Loved him come out of USC. He didn't really show up in his first couple of years, but he's a first-round wide receiver. He's got a lot of talent, so he's been showing that. Torrey Smith, if you want to throw a dart, maybe he'll catch a 6-yard touchdown.
He's a sleeper pick for me, is it Torrey Smith?
Yeah, he could go for a long one, but, I mean, they just don't even – between those top 3 guys, between Jeffrey, Aguilar, and Ertz, like, nobody even cares what Torrey Smith does. He can just go pick his nose on the sideline, and everybody's like, whatever, we'll go score.
Catch butterflies.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. And he's good. I like him. He's not bad, but I think this is a game that, again, is dominated by Zach Ertz. Jeffrey, I think, shows up. Aguilar probably gets a touchdown. Carson Wentz. I mean, when you've got John Gruden on Monday Night Football, pretty much just like rub it, like just polishing you up, you're doing something right. You're winning games and you're playing well.
Yeah, see, like I mentioned, Smallwood, he's pretty much the back that I would play just because he is, like, how much I love Darren Sproles, even when he was on the Saints. It's just like that PPR reception game, that he's the receiving back. If you're going to play an Eagles back, which I don't really suggest because they are basically a 3-headed monster, I would pick Smallwood. But if you're going to throw...
Look at it though. Like you've got a lot of mid-range wide receivers right now. You don't have the onus to pay down at running back. Like you don't have to try to dart throw out of Smallwood. And I just don't see the consistency in the involvement that you're really like I said, if he goes off for a 60-yard run, then he gets value. But there's so many other backs out there that are probably in that $5,000 to $6,000 range that I would much rather go after just because of their floor.
The only outlier that I just touch on quickly here, some of these guys might show up in our next segment, but the Chargers at New England, this could also be a game that has some potential because, you know, the Patriots, with the exception of last week, have been allowing like the most points against, and the Chargers.
Actually, they've been pretty good the last 3 weeks. So even though their DVOA has been not very good, they've performed better on the field.